Hey Downtown Van.
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 You're listening to Hey Downtown Van, hosted by the Downtown Vancouver BIA.
Hey Downtown Van, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Sofia Laratta, and joining us today is Darryl Condon, managing partner at hcma, known for creating spaces that bring people together and inspire community connection. His work explores how thoughtful design can foster belonging and strengthen the social fabric of our cities. It was a very interesting conversation, and I'm really excited for you to listen, so let's get into it. Darryl, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
How was your morning so far?
Oh, not too bad. I mean, it's not raining yet, and I had a nice walk over. It's always nice to walk through the streets of Vancouver to go to a meeting, so it's awesome.
Amazing. Well, hcma is pretty close by, which is nice. So for the listeners who might not know your work, tell us about your journey and how you came into the architecture world and what brought you to hcma.
Wow, that's a long story.
It's a long question.
A long journey. Well, I was one of those kids that, like, from an early age was really fascinated with how things put together and really became fascinated by buildings. Really, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And part of my early experiences, my parents started and then built a land surveying company literally in our basement.
Oh, wow.
And so, I'd be playing here and there'd be stacks of blueprints, of drawings of buildings or of houses. And I just remember becoming fascinated by the drawings. And so it was kind of, for me, came at it from both those sides, really became intrigued by the process and the nature of communicating a building through drawings, and then just the experience of buildings. And so I, from a young age, had a relatively clear path. I had a couple of little jigs and jogs. So, from Saskatchewan originally, went to university in Montreal. So from small city to a very large, dynamic,
multicultural,
more urban city, exactly. And then went and worked in the UK. Was in London for just over a year.
Wow.
So you go from like Regina, which is 150,000 people, to Montreal, which is one scale, and London, which is a whole nother scale. And so I had these experience of these sort of very large and dynamic urban environments. I eventually made my way back to Canada, and eventually made my way to the West Coast and moved to Vancouver in 1993.
Nice.
So I've been here for over 30 years and joined a predecessor firm to hcma in 1994. So for me, I've been with the succession of companies that have been, sort of the hcma journey for over 30 years.
That's really cool. I can relate kind of, because my family owns a construction company in Alberta, and just growing up around new houses and the blueprints, it's so fascinating. But for me personally, it's not my journey. So that's very cool that you were inspired by that and you wanted to continue doing that in your own career. So for those who don't know hcma, how would you describe the firm and what makes it unique? Yeah,
so at HCMA, we're really motivated by the impact we have in communities. We're really privileged to do primarily, or at least the large majority of our work is for public sector organizations. So municipalities, school districts, universities, everything from swimming pools to ice rinks, libraries to social housing, really everything in between. So for us, and our clients, architecture, the process of building is really delivering a social good. And it's infused in us an approach and a mindset that is really about deep impact in our community. And I think what makes us maybe different is the depth to which we integrate both social and environmental performance and the commitment we have to helping our communities prosper and thrive. And we do that in three ways. We do that through the designs, the products of our designs. We do that in the way that we do that work. So that can be process related, involving the public, co-creation, those sorts of things. And then we also look at what is the capacity of a firm like ours to make a difference outside of the work we do. How can we be a good citizen as a company and make a difference? So we focus on all three of those levels in order to maximize the impact we have in our communities.
That's amazing. HCMA does really, really great work. And I know Downtown Van and HCMA have collaborated on a few projects, which is amazing. So from your experience, why is public space so essential to the health and identity of a city like Vancouver?
Public space is so vital to civic life. It's the place we come together as citizens. It's the place we bump into each other and interact. It's the spaces between buildings, in between the activities that we might be going to and from, where life actually happens and where community is built. And so we need those types of spaces. We need those types of spaces to encourage lingering and to encourage interaction and to encourage people to come together. We really deeply believe in the importance of human connections as a way of fostering change and the types of change we want in our community and our society. And we think that well-designed and well-activated and vibrant public space is a really important component of that. It can't solve all of our issues, but it's the precursor to helping to solve so many of them.
Well, 100%. And I mean, we've seen that gathering of people and having local events changes the perception of people feeling safe in an area, or lighting in an area can change the perception of people feeling safe in an area. So I don't think people realize how important city planning in this sense is to the identity of a city and how it functions. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's so critical to whether or not people feel welcome in that space. If we're designing our cities for the automobile, do people feel welcome in that? Are they going to sit and linger and sit and have a cup of coffee in a public space? They're far less likely to. We need to design our cities recognizing that they're really for people. All the other things there are to support our needs.
Yeah. And maybe we get into this a little bit down the line, but in terms of the places that you've lived, like Montreal and London, how does Vancouver compare to having an identity and being a livable city in the sense that we're talking about?
Well, when you think about, there's so many rankings of world's most livable cities, and Vancouver always scores highly. In fact, it scores higher than Montreal or London. It's considered in that category with cities like Melbourne and Sydney and Vienna, Copenhagen. And I mean, there's good reason for that. There's a lot to celebrate about Vancouver. Our connection to nature, the relationship to the water. We've done a lot of really good things.
Yeah.
But we haven't really done public space very well. We've done a really good job along the edge of the city. We've got a 40-kilometer seawall. But the seawall is about movement, right? Where do you linger? Where do you stop? And sure, there's a bench here and there, but are there spaces to gather? Are there places where you just want to be? We don't do those spaces nearly as well in Vancouver. If you look at Montreal, they've done so many amazing things in transforming that city and investing in public space. And when I lived there in the 1980s to today, in many respects, it's unrecognizable. The commitment they've made to the public realm and to creating flexible, dynamic spaces that can work in the winter for snow clearing, but still host a festival with tens of thousands of people at the same time. But they've done that with intention. And I think London as well has some wonderful public spaces, squares, plazas, markets. That's where we really lack, is those flexible, large gathering type spaces that can be used for so many different aspects of civic life.
Totally. And I'll come back to this because we have another interesting question about this that's related, but public gathering spaces. What makes a great public space? And how can we design them better in Vancouver to foster inclusivity and connection?
I mean, there's a lot of components to that. A good public space. Well, I would start by saying a really good public space is inclusive. And by inclusive, I'm really meaning all the dimensions of inclusivity, whether that be ensuring that all the barriers of participation are addressed. And that could be physical barriers, that can be cultural barriers, that can be economic barriers, but that a place where truly all members of the city can come together and feel welcome. That's the starting point. And that should be the low bar, right? But a good public space has places to sit. has places to linger, has places to that'll allow activation. Often includes food or coffee or the things that encourage that lingering and can support both and be comfortable both when you've got 20 people in that public space or 2,000.
Right.
And part of that is how you design not only the large spaces but the edges to accommodate people to be in that space. Is there increasingly in our cities the importance of shade? Are there places for people to gather without the impacts of the sun? That's other attributes. I mean, there's so many different components that really come together to make a good and important public space.
Could there be an amazing, perfect public space? Like, is there anywhere that's 100% perfect?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of really, and I've been fortunate to travel and experience many, many wonderful public spaces, and I think we can learn from all of them. Not everything is transferable into this location or this climate or this political context. I think our job, certainly as those that have the privilege to shape public space, is to think about what can we learn, what can we bring, how do we adapt that into this particular context, and take the best of all of those public spaces.
Of all the public spaces that you've seen, what is one of your favorites?
Interesting. Now, sometimes I get asked that question, like if you could only go to one public space again, like what would it be? And it would be, I'd have a hard time answering it, but I would point to pieces of probably several. The cities that inspire me, I guess, not to avoid the question, but there's 3 cities right now that really inspire me quite a bit, and for slightly different reasons. I start with Melbourne. Melbourne has a network of laneways that crisscross the city that provide another way of experiencing the city that is counter to sort of the dominant sort of commercial zone. And it creates the most wonderful series of public spaces. I think Vancouver needs more of that. So that's one thing that I am really inspired by. Another is Copenhagen. And much is said about Copenhagen, but they've done an amazing job of not only encouraging some really wonderful public space and pedestrianized areas, but really strong public realm, really strong sidewalks, really good integration of activity and healthy activities within their infrastructure as well. And then the third space, and if I had to pick one, I'd probably go to this, and that's Oslo. Oslo, over a number of years, has had a progressive approach to transforming their downtown area, and the results have been really remarkable. From a very automobile dominated area to one which is incredibly pedestrian friendly, has an amazing transportation network, and just wonderful places to be. And I think for Vancouver, there's so many similarities between a city like Oslo, both in terms of climate, in terms of relationship to a very, very busy port. And I think there's a lot that I'd love to see us learn from Oslo.
When you go to places like Oslo and even places in Italy and France, you notice that there's so many car-free areas. And it makes the visitor experience and the resident experience so much better. And I've heard Melbourne being kind of like the gold star standard in a lot of conversations that I've had with different people. I'll have to visit. I've never been, but I mean, I guess
great food scene too.
Really?
I mean, and I think those things go hand in hand. If you create these conditions where people want to linger and they want to be in that downtown area, and in the restaurants will follow, the cafes, the art galleries, the things that are supported by people just simply being there.
And I guess Vancouver has a lot of that already, but I think some of the challenges that we face are maybe permitting and getting buy-in from certain stakeholders. And we've seen challenges with lots of our partners and even internally, but maybe things are changing. In your opinion, are things changing?
I think they're changing slowly, and I think some of the work that we've done at HCMA in partnership with Downtown Van to demonstrate the possibilities of say, laneway transformations is an example of starting that conversation. But where does it go from here? And I think there's policy change that comes, you can do the demonstration, but then the policies have to change to encourage more of that and to encourage it to go to the next level. And I think we still have work to do as a city to look at the policies that are getting in the way of creating the type of vibrant urban experience that we will all benefit from.
Totally. And also, even I find personally, just in the culture of residents of Vancouver, we always complain about Vancouver not being fun enough or being cool enough. And I think we need to start actually making the fun or making it cool for ourselves. And
yeah, it's interesting. I've been in so many conversations lately about this sort of notion of Vancouver as the no fun city. And, I really believe, and I think you've just kind of alluded to it, is that we have to, I remember a conversation with a good friend of mine one time. We were talking about, if you want a more interesting city or more interesting ideas, like put interesting ideas out.
Yeah.
And they'll come back, right? Like, don't wait for others to do it. And so part of what's needed is that collectively, all of us to express more imagination and curiosity and creativity about what the city might become. So it's less about what we're not. And there's lots of problems, but there's lots to build upon. But where's the vision? Where is the experimentation? Where, we can all come up with ideas. We can all put them out there. We can all start the conversations about the type of city we want to have. And I think we have, certainly those of us that have some voice in our community. And I think a firm like ours does have a voice. And we try to use it for that. We try to put ideas out that will help shape a conversation and encourage people to look differently at the space around them.
Yeah, for sure. And when those ideas are put out into the world, into the universe and in the public realm, like, support those ideas instead of not being NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Like, put forward a positive idea, start a conversation. You never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, for sure. So when we think about who Vancouver and our downtown is for, who do you think we're designing it for right now?
Who are we designing the downtown for? Maybe the cheeky answer would be say no one, right? Like, are we really designing intentionally for people? I mean, there's lots of examples where we are. So I don't believe we're not. Yeah. But there's still far too much dominance on the service and infrastructure, vehicular infrastructure needs of the city. There's still way too much preference given to those things that are again providing service to our community, and not enough about the civic life that we're trying to encourage. So that would be at one level. Not everyone is welcome. I think there's lots of barriers in our public space. Some of them visible, some of them less so. I don't think we've got enough truly democratic spaces where all are welcome.
Interesting. Why do you think that is? And what would make some of those spaces you're alluding to more welcoming for everyone?
Some of it's fear. Of course, it's also important to acknowledge that coming out of the pandemic, we saw a significant change in people's experience of, and so I'm not naive to that or some of the challenges that happen, but I mean, just sound fundamental principles of how to make good public space, create a reason for somebody to be there, create things that are going to activate it, provide opportunities for food, for coffee, ensure that the uses around that public space are helping to activate that and they're energizing it, or not blank storefronts or blank walls.
Right. Right.
It's not just, public spaces can't operate independent from the system in which they're in. Sometimes we think of, well, let's design a square. And, if you think about the square in front of the art gallery, for instance, and there's a lot there I think is really wonderful. And it supports a wide range of, like, it's a huge improvement over what there. So I don't want to sound critical of that. Yeah. But it's somewhat disconnected from the rest of the city. Even getting to it, crossing the street, like there's you have to sort of fight through traffic just to get there, right? And so how should a space like that actually feed into and integrate and transform the public around it? Totally. And I think that one of the things that we lose sight of is that any city, downtown core or any other parts of our city are an ecosystem, and that we shouldn't be looking at any one component of that in isolation and think we just designed that. We have to we have to be imagining how it all works together. How do you get there? What happens when you get there? How does, what are the sequence of spaces? What are the sequence of smaller spaces that support those other spaces? And so that's one of the things that's missing, I think, from the way we've designed our city is really to think more systemically.
And then when you think about places like Milan and Venice, where it feels like the city was built around these piazzas, where all roads lead to the one center point in those cities, why do you think North America kind of went away from that city building design?
I'm sure an urban historian would give you a better answer as to the whole evolution of city design. So my answer might be a little bit simplistic, but we went through a wave of city building that focused, and certainly the Canadian West, much of it was dominated by the needs of the railway companies as they spread, and they sort of stamped these very rational city grids across the country, and they served a purpose. They enabled people to come and to build these communities. And it was a period in which cities were built in a very rational way, in a very engineering dominated way. We pulled apart the various components of public space. Engineers looked after roads and water and sidewalks, and maybe planners looked after other things, and so there was a lack of cohesion across how all of these pieces fit together, and it really resulted in a dominance of the engineering requirements of traffic. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to walk and use transit to go to work, and every day I'm kind of reminded about the absurdity of some of even the pedestrian regulations that we have in our city, and it's just an example of how we've given up so much to the automobile and other needs that we have. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No,
but
it does.
So our cities were designed at a different time than a lot of these European cities, and we should probably also acknowledge that in some cases the political conditions that resulted in the spaces that we now enjoy were actually quite horrific.
Right.
The transformation of Paris was clearing out slums, displacing people, allowing for easy troop movement to quell dissent. Right. Like it had a political and military purpose, but the result of that has left an incredibly beautiful city that we admire in many, many different ways. But could you imagine today if somebody proposed we're going to drive a grand boulevard through an existing neighborhood? I mean, we were through that in the 70s, and Vancouver rejected that with stopping the freeways, and it's just not acceptable today, right? So we have to find other ways, and we have other tools. So we have to work within the political context and the societal context that we have today.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I have so many questions about that, but I will move on for the sake of everybody else. How can we ensure that our approach to city building reflects everyone who calls Vancouver home? Yeah,
I've touched on that a little bit, but maybe to be a bit more specific, it starts with whose voices are included. Are we listening to all, intentionally listening to all Vancouverites? And part of that is listening differently, providing input, using methodologies and approaches to co-create spaces where a broader range of our community members are involved. It sounds simple, but it's not done often enough, and it's not often done very well.
How is it historically done? How would we get everyone's opinion on something?
In many cases, in many cities, even today, there isn't a very strong culture of public participation. A municipality might propose something, and it'll go to council, and then the public will have an opportunity to come and speak. There's actually a pretty well ingrained culture of community involvement in projects here, in public projects and in development projects in Vancouver, much different than other parts of the world. In fact, when I travel and speak in Europe and discuss with architectural colleagues there, they can't believe how involved the public is in the buildings that we designed. So there is something there that we are doing a portion of that well, but it's not consistent enough, and it's not necessarily deep enough. And that's part of getting more inclusive public space is listening to more people and talking to the people with a broader range of lived experiences.
Right. And I mean, I guess we kind of saw the public engagement with the Granville Plan. The city really tried to involve our organization and all the businesses on Granville Street. So it is being done in certain ways.
It goes in waves.
Yeah.
We've seen perhaps less of that more recently. I think that while that expectation and the culture and the skill set locally to be able to have those conversations is really deeply embedded, we do see that come and go, and some municipalities are more committed to it than others. But it is a fundamental step if we want a truly inclusive, integrated, resilient community. It starts with the public.
So what examples or principles inspire you when thinking about how to create a more vibrant, inclusive, and resilient downtown?
I would say what's really inspiring to me right now is where we see examples of experimentation. Designing, building, and transforming a city can be a long process. And there's lots of wonderful examples of these sort of quick changes or simple, low-cost changes that suggest another future. And, that was certainly the approach that we took together with Downtown Van in the More Awesome Now laneway transformations, is with simple means and with paint, start to have a conversation. So those are the types of examples that certainly inspire me and that I look to when I'm learning from other cities. Others examples would be where people are thinking about public space differently. They're thinking about what is public space and what has possibilities of public space, and layering on other and combining different uses. Copenhagen, there's some wonderful examples of how they've used the water. They invented a completely different type of public space with the harbor bath. And those are some of the most dynamic spaces in Northern Europe, in those cities. And 20 years ago, that didn't exist. So that's an example of a willingness to experiment and take risks.
Right.
We don't get significant change without some risk.
Yeah.
And so cities that are willing to fail, willing to start, stop, restart, those are the cities that inspire me right now.
Yeah. And I feel like there have been talks about Vancouver not being a super risk-taking city in that sense. We kind of want to have everything planned out before we do something, and we have to evaluate everything. We don't just go out and try. In Copenhagen, is it like a waterway transportation system? Is that what you're referring to, or what is?
No, they've created, they've used their harbors in a very different way. I would say they went through a whole series of steps to reclaim their harbor for public use.
Okay.
Make the waters swimmable. And it involved, large-scale sewage infrastructure and stormwater, like a whole bunch of large kind of invisible infrastructure. The end result meaning that the harbor became cleaner and became a place where you could swim. To demonstrate this and to encourage this, they built what was called a harbor bath. So it was like you could think of it as a floating outdoor swimming pool.
Cool.
But it was really a dock system sitting on the water that encouraged people to come and swim.
Wow.
And over the last 20 years, that's evolved in many different ways. But what's emerged is a culture in that city of urban swimming and ocean swimming that went from almost non-existent to being incredibly prevalent.
That's
it's
really
made a
cool.
huge difference. And, it's spawned all kinds of developments. I mentioned Oslo earlier. There's an amazing example in Oslo. It's like a floating public square. Wow. And more people go there just to hang out and have a picnic than go to swim in the ocean.
Really?
Yeah, and that's being inventive. That's thinking about, okay, what's available to us? And land is expensive. How might we use the water differently?
Right. Do you think that's achievable in Vancouver? Because isn't part of the water owned by certain people and corporations?
It's complicated here. At HCMA about 10 years ago, we put forward a proposal for what we called the Cole Harbour Deck, which was learning from the Northern European examples and suggesting a floating public space in Cole Harbour. It was interesting because that was about 10 years ago. We put this this notion of putting an idea out into the world, which we did. A couple of years later, this is a diversion, but a couple of years later, we were doing some work for the Vancouver Park Board, and it was public surveys around their desires for aquatic activities. And the number one thing that people asked for was a harbor deck, which was interesting because we invented that term in relation to the Cole Harbor deck.
Right.
It didn't exist 2 years earlier. And all of a sudden, by putting that idea out, people were asking for it. So it's an example of how you can, by putting an idea out into the world, you can be a catalyst.
Yeah.
But coming back to your question, it is complicated. You know, the port, which is a federal, has federal jurisdiction, has certain status on most of the waters, but not all. There are water lots that allow for certain uses. We do allow a number of different types of public uses on the water. There's boat harbors, there's yacht clubs, there's rowing clubs. So it takes some imagination. It takes some political will to see these spaces differently. And so, you know, we can put an idea out in the world and we can advocate, and then, you know, collectively we need to see the champions emerge at a political level for the types of change that is needed.
Right, 100%. I always thought it was crazy that, like, we have so many beautiful beaches here, and not one of them has, like, a beach club. Like, when you go to the south of France, and you can rent a daybed if you want to be a little bit bougier with an umbrella. And it's just so interesting that we don't have services like that at our beaches, but maybe one day. So ideas like the 15-minute city have become politicized. And even evidence-based interventions like bike lanes are being reversed. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I wish I had a simple answer to that, because if I did, I could propose a solution. It would be really, really helpful. Because you're right. Like, it's crazy that evidence doesn't seem to matter. You know, it's like this notion that, just one more lane of traffic on the freeway is going to make the difference, which of course it doesn't. It's been proven over and over again. Yeah. And yet, for some reason, from a political level and a public level, I mean, politicians support those projects because the public support those projects. So, I mean, we could point to politicians and say, why are you supporting that extra lane of traffic? They're doing it because that's what the public are willing to support. So it starts with us. But why is it that we reject science? Why is it that we reject evidence? Perhaps it's fear of change, thinking only about our own needs, not thinking about the broader needs. I think it's a lack of curiosity, and I think what we really need to overcome some of that and depoliticize it is actually to create a really compelling why, a really compelling vision of what it is that we want our city to be, so that we can show how these things connect to it. Yeah. Because it's so easy when you look at something in isolation, you say, well, we're going to put a bike lane here. It's like, you know, it's so easy to criticize what that would mean. But when you think this is part of creating a city that's better for all of us, and this is all the reasons why, and this is in support of that. I don't think we do that well enough. And I think the professionals that are involved understand that, but I don't think the public has really seen the vision to which we're all aspiring. Yeah, and I think even back in the day, I think our organization was publicly not in support of bike lanes. And then I think maybe we switched our perception and we were in support of bike lanes. And at the end of the day, it turned out to be a great success. And we have the Richard Street bike lanes. And even now the Granville Street Bridge is super pedestrianized and made for bike lanes. So yeah, you're right. It's just maybe a lack of curiosity, but also education on certain topics. Well, I think the story of downtown Van and the shift in policy being against to recognizing the benefits of bike lanes is it's an example we all share. It's an example it's so important, right? Because downtown Van and the business community here had a point of view, but were open and actually paid attention to what followed and you know, recognized all of the benefits from that, you know, and that's such an important thing. The voice of stakeholders and advocates like downtown Van are so important in creating the type of city that we want. 100%. So how can architects and urban designers help depoliticize good city making and refocus the conversation on
what you were saying.
Well, I think one of the things that architects, urban planners, urbanists are really good at storytelling, really good at painting a picture of a brighter future and of what's possible. And so I think we should be using those skills to demonstrate and communicate to people the possibilities of improving our city. I think that's a primary, certainly a primary thing, but I also think we should be using our voice more. I think that we need to advocate, we need to stand up and really express what it is that we believe and what it is that we think we need in our communities. And I think we also need to put forward ideas. I think we need to put forward not simply observations or critiques of what exists now or what might be proposed, but propose solutions, put ideas out into the world, start those conversations, facilitate those conversations, and just be part of the dynamic and part of the conversation.
And I know HCMA is working with us and some other stakeholders on childcare advocacy and how we don't have enough childcare spaces in downtown. So I think HCMA is doing a great job of being a public advocate and using your voice.
Well, thank you. I mean, we certainly want to be. We try to be, not only here in Vancouver, but in the other cities where we're located. We do believe that's part of our responsibility, and we try to shift from that. Wouldn't it be nice if to, well, how can we actually move that forward? How can we put those ideas out? And the childcare study it's a great example. And that came from our standpoint. That came from a conversation inside our firm. We had 2 years ago, we had 10 people out on parental leave,
wow.
about a 90-person office. That's a significant.
Yeah.
And what we found is that our staff have so much trouble re-entering the workforce because of the absence of childcare.
Yeah.
And this is a societal problem. And so we need better solutions for our families and for the children in our communities everywhere. And why not in the downtown core?
Yeah.
Why not provide, the full range of life in the core? So, we really believe that these are questions that need to be asked and that we can play a part in exploring them.
Cities like Copenhagen, like you said, are often held up as models of livability. But you also have said that we should look through them at a critical lens. What lessons can we learn from them, and what should we do differently?
So earlier this year, I was privileged to be part of a group that visited Copenhagen. There were, I think, 25 of us from around the world that gathered to talk about the future of cities and to learn from Copenhagen. And it was really interesting. And there's lots that we can learn from Copenhagen, but it's far from perfect. And it's important that we always maintain a critical stance when we're looking at our city and other cities as well. One of the things, and some of the things that I think, when I look at Copenhagen example and that I'm critical of, is when you look at a number of the new urban areas that have been developed, they're far from diverse. They're very tightly controlled to the extent where, the ground floor retail is sort of centralized ownership and centralized control and highly, highly curated, which provides maybe an Instagram-worthy experience of city making. But where's that new immigrant family that wants to start a little business? They have no place in that community. So there's a lack of diversity in many of the new urban areas in Copenhagen. And so that's something that I think we should just acknowledge, right? And say that that's not good enough. We need to allow for more diversity. And I would say another thing, similar to Vancouver, a similar challenge in that so much of the new development has been put into areas where there was no development before, where there was nobody to complain, where there was, effectively. In Copenhagen, they've created landfill areas in their harbor. They've transformed former port areas into really quite interesting urban environments. But what about the rest of the city? What does that mean for the rest of the city?
Right.
And I think it leads to an imbalance. It leads to zones of the city that are for a few and other parts of the city where perhaps newcomers to that community, by a whole bunch of reasons, maybe feel more welcome.
Right.
And is that what we need? You know, or do we need cities where people feel welcome, a broader range of people feel welcome across the whole spectrum of the city? And I think that imbalance, and I think we suffer from that in Vancouver, and some of the current debates that we're having about the transformation of the city are because we've used up a lot of the easy to develop lands where there weren't stakeholders, and now we're pushing into areas where there are people that have have their lives, and they have quite rightly a perspective on what they hold precious that we're finding it hard to reconcile as a community. And
Interesting.
somehow we need to not think that the way forward is to only build on areas that haven't been built on yet.
Right.
We need to find a way to bring the community along and transform all of the city in a way that supports the future we want.
Right. And I guess that's kind of a benefit to living in Canada, where we have so much space compared to even the United States. But it also can be seen, like you said, as a downside, where we're only developing in areas that are not developed yet, and we're not revitalizing the areas that need it most.
Well, the fact that we've got so much land is to our detriment. In much of the country, and certainly in the U.S. as well. The notion that we can just sprawl isn't the answer either. That's not how you get a healthy, sustainable, and resilient community. We need to build walkable, more compact, complete communities. We need to think of the sort of experiment of automobile-dependent suburbia over the last 75 years as not as the end that we aspire to, but that an experiment that in many respects hasn't led to wonderful cities. And, Vancouver is unique because we have constraints. We've got the U.S. border to the south. We've got mountain range to the north. We've got the ocean to the west. And, of course, the Fraser Valley. And one of the things that I think has led to so much of what's positive of the transformation of Vancouver over the last number of years are those constraints. And so it's really good to have constraints. It's caused a way of thinking about the region that has led to far better transit usage than I think every other city in North America but New York. Right? That doesn't happen in a city with sprawl. That happens with a city that's really built around its constraints. And I think we need to celebrate that. And I think we need to be less resistant to those constraints and really see them as a huge advantage here.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because I came from Calgary. I haven't lived there in 10 years now, but every time I go back, there's a new subdivision or there's a new community, and it just keeps growing outwards. And then the downtown remains kind of a quiet, not utilized area because the rest of the city keeps growing. So I see where you're coming from.
And for a lot of people, they don't see an alternative.
Yeah.
They think that they have to move further out to be able to afford a place to live. And of course, we have one of the many crises that we're dealing with, of course, is an affordability crisis.
Yeah.
Again, it's a failure of imagination to conceive of a city where everyone can be housed and afford to be housed. It's a design problem.
Yeah.
We haven't put ourselves in the right position to solve it yet.
Yeah. And I guess also people, if that's what they want, you also have to think about, not to get political, but who you're voting for and who those people are in government that will want to build and revitalize a downtown or have young people move into the city. So yeah, it's very interesting. What exciting projects do you have coming up with HCMA? What are you looking forward to? We're
so fortunate to be doing the work that we do. And, from very large community recreation projects like the new Harry Jerome Community Recreation Center in North Vancouver that we're really looking forward to furthering our exploration with downtown van and laneway transformation, sort of at every scale in between. One of the projects it's not in Vancouver that I'm really excited about, that I think is relevant for Vancouver, is a project we're doing in the city of Calgary. Oh. And we're designing a new home for the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at the University of Calgary.
Oh, cool.
And the approach that we're taking there is to move these design schools from the campus into the heart of the city, into the downtown core. And doing this by transforming a former oil company headquarters building into a design school. Wow. So taking a former office building and putting 1,200 students smack dab in the middle of the city. And
that's very cool.
The educational value for the students, I believe they're going to come out of that school so much better equipped to deal with and help shape a more positive built environment because of the interactions, the experiences, and the things they're going to have to confront just in their daily experience of being a student in that context. And also by injecting 1,200 students into that area, it's going to help transform and revitalize a part of the city.
Yeah.
And so just so many reasons why I'm really excited about that. I think it's a model of context-embedded education, particularly education related to the built environment, that others will follow. And I think we're providing a really fascinating example of how to use that sort of institution for another type of change.
Yeah. And I've always wondered why certain universities or colleges have campuses in a downtown core. We have lots in Vancouver, but that makes sense. It brings more people downtown. It maybe will mean that more young people will be living in that area, and then it revitalizes the places around it. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. We're so fortunate to have the post-secondary institutions, educational institutions in the downtown core. It makes a huge difference. It brings students, it brings activities, it provides opportunities for learning for people that work and live in the downtown core that is far more accessible. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It just leads to a much more balanced and rich urban environment. And we need more of that. The idea that we should segregate and put, higher education, in a sort of privileged zone away from the city, which was the trend 100 years ago when many universities were designed. And in fact, that was one of the takeaways from my experience at McGill in Montreal was a very urban and embedded university campus, completely different to the university, like say UBC, where it's just one with the city. And it does change your perspective. It does. Certainly when you're learning about shaping the built environment, having that experience is really, really important.
Yeah, that's so cool. When will the project be? Are you working on it now, or?
It's under construction right now.
Cool.
There'll be students learning to be architects, planners, and landscape architects starting in January of next year.
Wow, congratulations. That's so exciting.
Oh, thank you.
I can't wait to see how that unfolds, especially in my hometown. So very cool. If you could articulate a compelling vision for the future of downtown Vancouver right here, right now, what would it look like?
2 words, less cars. I mean, it starts with thinking differently about what the city is for. We need more pedestrian spaces. We need spaces that are activated by people and designed for people. So that's where my vision would start. I would see a network of laneways activated not just with color but real activity and uses that provide for the incubation of interesting restaurants and cafes and small businesses that have a hard time surviving. I'd see a community where all are welcome and that the barriers to participation are removed, and that where we're not afraid to take risks and that we're continuing to ask questions about where we want to be in the future and never resting on our laurels and taking anything for granted, but really always trying to be a better version of ourselves. Yeah.
Darryl, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people learn more about HCMA if they're curious?
Well, thanks for having me. Certainly our website is a good place to start, hcma.ca. You can learn anything you want about us on our website, and all of our contact information is there as well. And people can track me down on LinkedIn or on other favorite social media platforms.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. That was such a great conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to Hey Downtown Van. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Darryl Condon. If you'd like to learn more about our organization and all that we do, you can visit our website, dtvan.ca, or follow along with the podcast at Hey Downtown Van.